Thomas's return to the center of hope for the future is framed, at least on the surface, as a professional rescue. His reinstatement as lead designer arrives wrapped in the language of necessity, of urgency, of survival. Sales are threatened, competition is tightening, and the pressure to evolve has become relentless. From the outside, it looks like the most logical solution, a proven creative force stepping back into a role he once dominated, bringing structure, vision, and momentum to a brand that suddenly finds itself fighting on multiple fronts. Yet beneath that rational explanation lies a far more dangerous truth, one that has nothing to do with fabric, silhouettes, or runway success. Thomas's return does not merely stabilize the company, it alters the emotional gravity around Hope, pulling her into an orbit she believed she had escaped, not through temptation or overt betrayal, but through the quiet erosion of distance. Hope does not welcome this realization immediately. At first, she tells herself the story she needs in order to function. She convinces herself that this is about the company, about responsibility, about protecting something she has built with her own hands and her own convictions. She has fought too hard, endured too much scrutiny, to allow personal discomfort to jeopardize the future of her work. In that mindset, Thomas becomes a tool rather than a threat, a means to an end rather than a complication. His talent is undeniable, his understanding of the brand intuitive, his commitment, at least on paper, absolute. In moments of calm, Hope believes she can manage the arrangement, that maturity and clarity will succeed where chaos once reigned. But calm does not last. It never does when ambition and vulnerability occupy the same space. As Thomas reclaims his position, success follows with unnerving speed. Designs resonate. Orders increase. Industry buzz shifts. Each small victory reinforces the narrative that his presence is not only beneficial but essential. With every achievement, the line between professional gratitude and emotional reliance grows thinner. Late nights become routine, not out of indulgence, but out of necessity. Deadlines tighten, expectations rise, and the brand's survival begins to feel personal in a way that borders on existential. Hope is no longer simply running a company, she is defending her identity, her values, and her right to exist in a world that increasingly rewards aggression over integrity. This is where the danger truly begins. Not in attraction, not in longing, but in proximity under pressure. Thomas understands this environment instinctively. He does not rush, does not push, does not repeat the mistakes that once defined him. Instead, he adapts. He becomes indispensable through consistency, through reliability, through the quiet language of shared exhaustion. He is present when decisions weigh heaviest, when doubts surface unspoken, when victory feels fleeting rather than celebratory. In these moments, he positions himself not as a challenger to Hope's marriage, but as an ally to her purpose. And that distinction matters, because it allows Hope to justify his closeness without confronting its implications. Meanwhile, the world outside Hope for the future grows more hostile. Katie's rise is not subtle, it is deliberate, strategic, and unapologetically ambitious. Her new fashion empire is built not merely to compete, but to dominate, fueled by resources, confidence, and the kind of clarity that comes from having nothing left to prove. Katie does not hide her intent, nor does she soften the impact of her expansion. She understands the battlefield she is entering, and she understands that victory will require casualties. For Hope, this means the margin for error disappears entirely. There is no room for hesitation, no space for emotional recalibration. Winning is no longer a goal, it is an obligation. Under this pressure, Hope begins to change in ways she does not immediately recognize. Her decisions grow sharper, her instincts more aggressive. She pushes herself harder, sleeps less, accepts stress as the cost of relevance. Each step forward feels earned, but also isolating. Liam, though present in her life, exists increasingly at a distance shaped by circumstance rather than choice. His world is entangled with competing interests, his loyalty divided between family legacy and marital devotion. Even when he tries to support Hope, the support feels fragmented, filtered through obligations that do not align with hers. Their conversations, once effortless, now require navigation, caution, and restraint. It is not that Hope stops loving Liam. It is that love becomes harder to access under constant strain. In contrast, Thomas is always there. Not because he is waiting, but because the work demands it. Not because he insists, but because circumstances align in his favor. He witnesses Hope at her most unguarded, not in moments of weakness, but in moments of relentless determination. He sees the toll leadership takes, the weight of expectation pressing against her composure. And he responds not with grand gestures, but with steadiness. That steadiness, over time, becomes intimate in a way neither of them initially acknowledges. The most unsettling aspect of this shift is its subtlety. There is no singular moment where Hope crosses a line, no dramatic decision that signals betrayal. Instead, boundaries blur through repetition. Through shared triumphs that feel too personal to celebrate with anyone else. Through exhaustion that lowers defenses without intention. Through the gradual realization that the person who understands her struggle most completely is standing beside her every day, rather than waiting at home. Hope is not unaware of this danger. She feels it in flashes of discomfort, in moments where familiarity edges toward dependence. She reminds herself of the past, of the cost of misjudgment, of the harm that once followed emotional blindness. Yet reminding herself does not eliminate the reality she now inhabits. The company needs her whole. The competition demands her best. And the person most aligned with that demand is Thomas. For Thomas, this dynamic is both vindication and restraint. He does not need to articulate his desire, because time is doing the work for him. He understands that the most powerful pull is not desire, but necessity. He positions himself as part of Hope's success story, weaving himself into the narrative of survival rather than romance. In doing so, he becomes difficult to remove without consequence. Any attempt to create distance risks destabilizing the very foundation Hope is fighting to protect. Katie's empire continues to expand, each move increasing the stakes. Media narratives frame the rivalry as inevitable, as a clash between vision and dominance. Investors watch closely. Public perception becomes volatile. Under this scrutiny, Hope's choices are no longer purely personal. They ripple outward, affecting livelihoods, reputations, and futures. The pressure to win becomes overwhelming, and with it comes the quiet justification of compromises that would have once felt unacceptable. Liam senses the shift, even if he cannot name it. He recognizes the signs of emotional withdrawal, the way Hope's focus sharpens inward, leaving less room for shared vulnerability. His own frustrations compound the distance. He is caught between loyalty to his family's ambitions and the growing fear that those ambitions are costing him the very relationship he fought to reclaim. Yet confronting the issue feels dangerous. To question Hope's reliance on Thomas risks sounding insecure. To challenge the professional reality, she faces risks minimizing her struggle. And so Liam hesitates, choosing silence where clarity is needed most. That silence becomes another fracture. As success accumulates, so does isolation. Hope stands at the center of her achievements, admired but increasingly alone. The victories she shares with Thomas feel immediate, earned through mutual effort. The victories she shares with Liam feel abstract, filtered through explanations rather than experience. This imbalance does not make Hope disloyal, but it makes her vulnerable. Vulnerable to the comfort of being understood without translation. vulnerable to the relief of shared burden. In this space, emotional lines do not need to be crossed to be erased. They fade through neglect, through exhaustion, through the quiet acceptance of a new normal. The tragedy of this trajectory lies in its inevitability. No one sets out to destroy the marriage. No one chooses betrayal outright. Instead, the forces at play, ambition, competition, history, proximity, align with ruthless precision. Hope is not pulled away from Liam by desire, but by necessity. By the relentless demand to succeed in a world that offers no mercy to hesitation. And Thomas, whether intentionally or not, becomes the constant in that storm, the one presence that does not require her to divide herself further. In the end, the question is not whether Hope will fall back into old patterns, but whether she will recognize the cost of survival before it becomes irreversible. Success offers protection, but it also demands sacrifice. And sometimes, the most dangerous sacrifices are the ones made quietly, without dramatic declarations, until what is lost cannot be reclaimed. In The Bold and the Beautiful, the marriage of Liam Spencer and Hope Logan arrives not as a triumphant conclusion, but as the uneasy calm before a storm that feels both inevitable and deeply personal. On the surface, their reunion appears to reward loyalty, endurance, and the belief that love, when tested enough times, eventually finds its way back home. Fans who have followed their turbulent journey are given the long-awaited moment they have hoped for, watching Liam and Hope finally stand before one another and choose commitment again. Yet beneath the soft lighting, the intimate vows, and the restrained celebration lies an unmistakable sense that this marriage has been placed deliberately in harm's way by forces far larger than romance alone. The timing is too precise, the circumstances too fragile, and the consequences too immediate for this union to exist in peace for long. The wedding itself is deliberately modest, stripped of grandeur and spectacle, almost as if the characters themselves understand that excess would tempt fate. There is tenderness in the way Liam looks at Hope, a mixture of relief and resolve, as though marrying her is both an act of love and an act of self-preservation. Hope, in turn, radiates a cautious optimism shaped by hard-earned lessons. She has loved Liam before, lost him, reclaimed him, and learned the cost of believing too easily in stability. This ceremony is not about fantasy, it is about survival. Yet survival in the world of Los Angeles power families is rarely neutral. It demands allegiance, sacrifice, and an acceptance that personal happiness often becomes collateral damage in much larger wars. That truth becomes painfully clear almost immediately. Within minutes of Liam and Hope saying, "I do," the ground beneath them begins to shift. The first tremor comes not from betrayal, but from ambition. Bill Spencer, ever the architect of chaos disguised as confidence, chooses this exact moment, his son's wedding day, to propose to Katie Logan. The audacity of the gesture is unmistakable. It is not merely a romantic move, but a declaration of intent, a strategic maneuver designed to reassert Bill's influence over both family and city. By tying his proposal to the announcement of a brand new fashion company, Bill transforms a personal milestone into a corporate coup, signaling that the Spencer legacy is no longer content to exist on the margins of the fashion world dominated by the Forresters and the Logans. This decision reshapes everything. The wedding that was meant to symbolize unity instead becomes the starting point of a corporate rivalry that cuts directly through Liam and Hope's marriage. Suddenly, love is no longer a private sanctuary, it is a contested space where loyalties are tested daily. Liam's involvement in his father's new fashion venture is not optional, it is expected, almost inevitable. Bill does not merely invite his son into the business, he positions Liam as a central player, a visible extension of the Spencer brand's challenge to the established fashion hierarchy. In doing so, Bill places Liam directly opposite Hope, whose identity, values, and professional life are deeply entwined with hope for the future. This is where the true conflict begins to take shape. On paper, Liam and Hope are newlyweds. In reality, they are competitors. Their dinners become strategic pauses between battles, their shared spaces filled with unspoken calculations. Hope understands what this rivalry means. She has spent years building her brand not just as a business, but as a moral statement, a commitment to inclusivity, sustainability, and second chances. To see Liam align himself with a competing fashion house, especially one launched by Bill's aggressive ambition, feels like a quiet betrayal, even if it is framed as familial duty rather than personal choice. Liam, meanwhile, finds himself torn between two versions of loyalty: the husband who wants to protect his marriage and the son who has been conditioned his entire life to prove his worth through Bill's approval. The tension escalates not through explosive confrontations, but through accumulation. Every decision Liam makes at work carries emotional consequences at home. Every success for Bill's company feels like a threat to Hope's life's work. Hope begins to question not only whether she and Liam can coexist professionally, but whether their marriage was doomed by timing rather than intention. The irony is cruel. They have reunited after so much loss, only to be placed on opposite sides of a war neither of them truly chose. As if this professional battlefield were not enough, the past refuses to remain buried. Thomas Forrester's return to Los Angeles adds a volatile emotional element that destabilizes Hope's carefully maintained balance. Thomas does not re-enter her life quietly. He arrives with purpose, determination, and the calculated insistence that his interest is purely professional. He argues for the future of Hope for the future with eloquence and intensity, framing his desire to work alongside Hope as an act of devotion to the brand rather than to her. Yet history lingers in every interaction. Thomas has always blurred the line between ambition and obsession, between collaboration and control. Hope senses this immediately. She tells herself that she is stronger now, more self-aware, more capable of maintaining boundaries. She has learned from past mistakes, endured manipulation, and emerged with a clearer sense of self. And yet, Thomas represents something deeply unsettling. A reminder of how easily professional admiration can slip into emotional entanglement, especially when stress and vulnerability weaken defenses. His presence forces Hope to confront uncomfortable truths about herself, about the parts of her that still crave validation, understanding, and unwavering belief in her vision. Thomas's insistence on prioritizing the company over personal history rings hollow, because it mirrors the very behavior he claims to have outgrown. He speaks of growth and accountability, yet his proximity to Hope feels intentional, strategic, and emotionally charged. For Hope, working with Thomas becomes a daily exercise in restraint. She must constantly assess not only his motives, but her own reactions. The question is no longer whether Thomas wants her back, because that desire has never truly faded, but whether Hope is strong enough to resist the subtle erosion of boundaries when her marriage is already under siege from external pressures. Liam, meanwhile, senses the shift even if he cannot fully articulate it. He notices the changes in Hope's demeanor, the exhaustion that goes beyond professional stress, the quiet moments where her thoughts seem elsewhere. His fear is not rooted in jealousy alone, but in guilt. He knows that his alignment with Bill's company has placed Hope in an impossible position. He knows that by choosing his father's ambition, he has unintentionally pushed his wife closer to the one man whose presence has always threatened their relationship. Yet walking away from Bill feels like a betrayal of another kind, one that carries lifelong consequences. The brilliance of this storyline lies in its refusal to simplify blame. No one is entirely wrong, and no one is entirely innocent. Bill's ambition is ruthless, but not without logic. Liam's loyalty is divided, but sincere. Hope's vulnerability is understandable, but dangerous. Thomas's persistence is framed as redemption, yet shadowed by past transgressions that cannot be erased by eloquent speeches alone. Each character acts from a place of internal logic, shaped by years of love, loss, and survival within a world that rewards power more than emotional honesty. As the weeks unfold, the central question becomes increasingly urgent. Can a marriage survive when love is forced to compete with legacy, ambition, and unresolved history? Hope and Liam may have reunited out of genuine affection, but affection alone cannot neutralize the structural pressures closing in around them. Their relationship exists within an ecosystem designed to exploit weakness, provoke rivalry, and turn intimacy into leverage. The danger is not a single dramatic betrayal, but the slow erosion of trust through compromise, silence, and emotional fatigue. Hope begins to wonder whether marrying Liam was an act of courage or denial. Liam questions whether choosing Hope means permanently severing himself from the expectations that have defined him since childhood. Thomas watches patiently, confident that time and pressure will accomplish what direct interference cannot. And Bill, ever the unseen conductor, seems content to let events unfold, knowing that chaos often produces outcomes more favorable than control. The reunion of Lope, once a symbol of enduring love, now feels like a fragile experiment conducted under hostile conditions. Their vows were sincere, but sincerity does not shield them from consequence. Every decision moving forward carries weight. Every hesitation becomes a potential fracture. The future of their marriage depends not on grand gestures, but on whether they can confront uncomfortable truths before silence turns into distance, and distance into regret. In the end, The Bold and the Beautiful does not ask whether Liam and Hope love each other. That answer has never been in doubt. Instead, it asks a far more unsettling question: is love enough when the world around you is designed to tear it apart?
Oh.